countless businesses have failed. We're actually losing more businesses per week right now than ever before in history in the UK because the market is so bad here. And it's not affecting us. It's not affecting us because I was like, well, we're just going to have clients around the world. So if one market struggles, we won't. So for me, it was really important that diversity was part of the DNA. The bit that combines all our clients is their ethics, is how they show up, is what they're trying to do in the world. Are they trying to create impact? There are some governments that we cannot work with. There are some governments that we'd love to work with because the way they operate is causing good in the world.
Welcome to the Perpetual Growth Podcast with Zach Palmer, the show where we explore the strategies, insights, and stories that empower you to grow your business, strengthen your relationships, and elevate your health. Because growth isn't just about what you achieve, it's about who you become along the way. Today, I am thrilled to welcome Johnny Pawlik. Johnny is the founder and CEO of the international marketing firm Mantra Media. As a seasoned and internationally recognized communications expert, Johnny specializes in supporting businesses from ideation to scale and sales through intelligent branding and marketing. With an Oxford education and over 21 years of marketing experience, Johnny is sure to provide some expert insights. Let's dive in and take another step on your journey to perpetual growth. Johnny, welcome to the show. Super excited to have you here today.
Thanks, Zach. It's such a pleasure to be here, mate. I love doing this kind of thing. I love your conversational nature. So I'm really excited for this.
Excellent. I'm excited to have you. You know, it's I always say I love people and I love to talk. So podcast, I think, is one of those just perfect fits.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, let's dive in, my friend, and let's see how much value we can add to our listeners and to the audience today. I always like to open with the same question and then let nature take its course and let the conversation unfold a bit more organically. So talk to us a little bit about your story history. Where did you get started in business? How did it lead you to where you are today? What were some of the major turning points, the opportunities, the big wins, the challenges, some of those standout moments in your mind that helped create the successful person that you are today? Talk to us a little bit about your life.
Well, thanks so much for the kindness, Zach. I really appreciate that too. I'm going to start with a recent story that actually takes me all the way back to the beginning.
Perfect.
Which is an extremely unusual coincidence and moment of serendipity. So I was at the House of Lords last week. So we have an upper house and a lower house. So we have the House of Commons, we have the House of Lords. And I was at the House of Lords for afternoon tea. We still do that in the UK. And I was sat, so you could choose whatever table to sit at. And I sat at table number 1. And to my right was a wonderful human being called Rachel. And she says, oh, so, where did you grow up? So I grew up in a small mining town called Mansfield in the East Midlands. And she went, oh, I grew up in Mansfield as well. And I said, oh, really? And she says, oh, yeah, I lived on, and she told me where the street she lived. And I went, I lived on the street opposite there. And she was like, wait. And then I started to name names of people I went to school with. And she went, that's my younger brother. Now, I've never met this person before. We weren't allocated seating, so you could sit wherever you wanted. And I was sitting next to the older sister of somebody I toured Europe in a band with.
Wow.
And I'd been to his house when I was younger, and I never knew she existed until last week. So a bit of serendipity there. And now we're connected. We're both business owners.
Yeah.
So I started out my career in the music industry. So I started gigging 27 years ago, which is, well, yes, I look a lot younger than I am. You're talking about longevity and perpetual growth. So these are all beautiful things that I can talk at infinitum. So I grew up in a very poor environment, very lack of opportunity, lack of I didn't understand that office jobs were a thing until I was a teenager. And as a late teenager as well, because we weren't, the education system there wasn't great. And the coal mines had just shut down and all that kind of thing. So the kind of manual labor that you would do in that town no longer existed, and it was kind of left. So I saw the difficulties that surrounded me. I saw that most people I grew up with either ended up in prison or dead. I thought, I don't like either of those outcomes. So how can I better myself? How do I create a reality that's mine and a reflection of who I am as a human being, rather than the circumstances I'm born into? So I had this hunch, and it was a hunch at the time, that if I educate myself beyond reason, that perhaps I can extend my thinking to get myself out of that situation. So that's what I did. I became extremely academic. So instead of hanging out with the kids on the street corner and doing terrible things, I thought, I'm just going to read an encyclopedia. And that's what happened. That was my journey. So I did very well at school and ended up touring in bands. So I toured Europe playing in jazz rock bands and things like that. Ended up getting signed to a few different labels. I was featured in national media. I had the most followed MySpace page of an independent artist for a time, which was awesome. And I was very good at communications and marketing. So before social media was in the generalized lexicon. So I was helping people promote their brands and celebrities and all that kind of stuff with their MySpace pages before social media was a thing. So I thought, actually, maybe there's something there I can lean into later in life. But I needed to get more educated. So once I left the music industry, because I felt it wasn't for me, there were habits and ways of being that didn't work for me. So working really late at night and then being surrounded by people who perhaps have habits of behaving that aren't conducive to a healthy lifestyle, i.e., drugs, smoking, alcohol, etc., etc. I thought that's not the space for me because I want a long, healthy life. So I came out of the music industry and I went to university. And I studied political philosophy at Oxford, which was wonderful. And I learned, again, a lot of lessons there. And when I came out of university, I worked for a company called Elsevier Publishing, which is the oldest publishing company in the world. They are huge. And I was their international campaign manager for overseas markets, which is a great job that I did for a while. And then I thought, you know what, I need to do something for myself. So my best friend, who I met at university, Kuno-san, who is from Nagoya but now lives in Kyoto, we said, let's do good things. Let's create a business one day. So fast forward to January 2015. It's really 2014, but January 2015, I formed a business called Mantra Media, scaled it very quickly in the UK. And then after a year, I said, I think we can do this in Japan. And my best friend, stroke business partner, said, okay, if you say it, let's do it. So we went to Kyoto, delivered a group of seminars to universities, small independent business owners, and kind of cultural and social community organizations. And it started to scale again. Fast forward over 10 years since then, we now have a business that's worked with $1 billion turnover companies around the world. We've worked with governments around the world on soft power campaigns. Worked with the Invictus Games in Australia in 2018. So I toured 4,500 kilometers with the Five Eyes Nation military, which was hard. Wow. I had a beard like this at the end of it. And did some amazing things. That's now, now we've got multiple businesses. I've got luxury retail stores around the world as well, as you've probably seen. So Atelier in Japan, and I can tell you about that story at some point. So yeah, in a nutshell, started from lack, want, desire, really invested in academia and bettering myself on my terms, and that took me to where I am today.
That's quite the journey. Thank you for taking the time to share with us. I mean, there's so many things I want to dive into here, so I'm really grateful that you took the time to thoughtfully highlight some of those really critical milestones. I want to go right to the beginning. You talked about, this conscious awareness, like you're looking around, you realize that the small town, the one primary job that was available is no longer available. And most people are not creating a life by their own design. If anything, they're going the other direction and abusing drugs and alcohol. Was it an inherent voice? Was it a message that your parents passed down, be it mother or father, maybe some extended family? Where did the drive, the desire, even the belief come from that you could be different? And I love exploring this topic because I believe there's always a moment, sometime where we consciously or unconsciously make a decision that this is not the life that we are going to live, and this is the life that I want to create. What was that moment for you? And who was or what was maybe the inspiration behind it?
That's a really good question. So the inspiration definitely wasn't at home. I don't have a relationship with my biological family.
Mm-hmm.
We all have to operate on our terms, and for me,
Mm-hmm.
ethics are the highest way to operate. Live your values and do no harm. So I wasn't going to get the kind of inspiration at home, particularly with the things that went on. I've well documented that in interviews with the BBC and various other international publications around mental health awareness and being in Machiavellian environments where you're not in control of your decisions and all that kind of stuff. So for me, it was more desperation rather than inspiration.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to be in this situation. I need to find a process to get out of here. Now you talk about that self-esteem, a belief thing. So I do believe that self-esteem is the seed that enables everything else.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, I was innately curious. Why do things have to be that way? So I was treated quite badly at school because I was from the council estate, so like the projects in the US. So because I went to a good school, I was treated very differently, and I had a foreign name, so it was doubly that it was like, oh, it's the foreign kid. So I had a lot of challenges at school, but I was very self-aware. So I'd be like, hang on, why am I being treated this way, whereas this person's treated this way? Yet academically, I am producing at this level.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it was obvious. It was like, you're from the poor area, so we're going to treat you differently. So I was very self-aware of things as a kid. And I think that put some fuel in me. It was a bit of a fire. It was like, okay, so you think I can't achieve anything. So I'll give you an example. Before my GCSEs, which is kind of when you're 16 in England, they were doing these special private tuition for kids in the school. And I was doing really well, and I wanted to do the best I could do. And I went to the headmaster, and I said, I would like to be part of this tuition as well, because I really want to do the best I can possibly do. And he said, instead of being encouraging and including me, and I saw the kids that were going into this extra tuition, he said, you're already doing better than we ever expected.
Double-handed statement.
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. Very
loaded with a compliment and implied backhand.
Yeah.
How did that make you feel?
It was, you don't realize the potential I actually have.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was a very cruel meeting, particularly with the person who's right at the top of the chain of your education. And then I noticed it was terrible. And I noticed that the kids that were getting it all had parents who were teachers. They were all wealthy. They were all da-da-da. And I was like, I've been separated again because of this stratification that you've got. as far as class. So class is still a big thing in the UK, but it's very subversive. Most working class people don't understand the barriers because we're not taught about the barriers that affect us.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, so I think it wasn't so much about self-esteem. I think it was curiosity, and also was an unwillingness to accept the life I'd been given.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's really, really powerful and very insightful as well. It's been said that pain is the greatest catalyst for change in the moment, but pleasure is the only real long-term motivator. So when we can effectively learn to utilize both the carrot and the stick, that's when we become really powerful. And kind of like you, different set of circumstances. But I grew up in a house where my parents they did very well when I was younger. I mean, we had big house on the water, boat, ski trips, all the nice things. But I also remember watching them lose the majority of it. And I remember the stress and the conversations and the tension and the worry and having to sell one house to downsize to another, and it was just that awareness of saying, this is something that I never want to go through and a challenge that I never want to live, that became one of my initial motivations. Now, the great thing about entrepreneurs, and my dad's an outstanding entrepreneur, they have a funny way of being able to bounce back. They can hit absolute rock bottom, and years later, they're multimillionaire or billionaires again. Like you've all heard countless stories. So there is positives in each, but I think those life experiences are really gifts by design, and it's our choice to decide what they mean to us and how we're going to utilize those opportunities, because that could have been your prison, but instead you chose to ask a better question. I don't remember exactly how you phrased it, but you said, if this is the life that everybody else is living, what do I have to do so that I can get out of this place and live a better life? Now, one thing I'm curious about is you had that awareness, and then of all things, you join a band. and, and why I say that with a little bit of irony in the tone is, you're like, I want to avoid the drugs and the alcohol and the bad decision making, and it's like bands are, somewhat notorious, at least in expectation, for that being a cornerstone to the environment, right? So you put yourself from one environment right into another. Do you think there was some kind of unconscious attachment to keep that part of that past life? Was it another turning point where you're like, I got great value from this and it helped take you down the marketing path? Talk a little bit more about making the decision to travel and tour, and then also the decision to move on and out.
So I was a very intelligent kid. I'm not saying I wasn't completely naive.
Yeah. Sure.
So I loved music. I've always been really creative. I had a natural knack. When I picked up an instrument, I could play it. There wasn't that kind of, lead time where you kind of just trying to work out how to get your muscles to move around it. For me, I picked up an instrument, I could play it. And it was odd. And I played well from the age of 12. And I used to spend my time just living in the music block. I found it a great way to express myself. I found that a lot of people liked listening to me play and enjoyed what I did. So I thought, this is a nice way to be, isn't it? And then I had a PE teacher who was wonderful. He used to lend me DVDs of Deep Purple doing live shows and things like that. And I would learn what he was doing and things like that. So I love music with a passion. I still play. I don't really perform these days, even though I get opportunities every now and again. Last time I think I played live was in Kyoto, in a bar in Kyoto a few years back. I saw music as an opportunity. So when I was 17, I think it was 17, I played the London Olympia as part of a festival. And I did a really long jazz set. And I was noticed by EMI and Polydor, the real big wigs. And what I found was there was a lot of challenges in the industry. Some of it was just incompetence, people not doing things properly. Other things were really dark. So I got to meet a lot of people who were, I mean, we talk about Harvey Weinstein, we talk about how there's been all these challenges in Hollywood and all the rest of it. But the music scene stuff is, obviously, we've got P. Diddy just coming out now. Man, we knew about this stuff 20 years ago.
Wow.
Like there was stuff happening back then, and this was like top executives. Now I won't talk about this on the podcast because it
Yeah.
probably won't get played anywhere. But you saw things and heard things and met people who'd experienced things, and you just thought this is not cool. But these people are so powerful. There's nothing you can do, and it got to the point where studio executives and people who were quite well known. I had a very well known manager 20 years ago who, again, operated in ways that were really not good. So I made the conscious decision. I said, well, I'm not willing to sell my soul for fame or fortune. And I think I had this instinctive bit, and this kind of took me into business because then I could control my world a bit better, which was about operating on your terms. So be the best version of you on your terms and never compromise your values. So that was the big thing for me. And because I realized that one day I would die, and that's a really useful thing to know, there's this thing about what do we want to leave behind? What do we want to take with us? If there is anything after this, none of us know. But if there is, wouldn't you like to take a sense that you'd done things on your terms without compromising and that actually you did no harm? So for me, that was the most important thing. It was, I want to operate with cognitive consistency. So what I think, what I say, and what I do is all the same. And that I never compromise my values. And if you understand longevity, you understand that life is very, very short, then compromising for just a little bit of gold, it's not worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. I mean, I think it's one of those things that most of us would prefer to be ignorant of because some of the acts and things are so heinous and there is so much power and influence. I mean, the best that we can do is live by our values. I mean, be a positive voice and influence. I'm curious, were there any aspects of your career when you were with the band? What did you learn that actually contributed to your ability to um, really become an expert in marketing and sales and communication? How did some of those experiences translate more to the business world, maybe in ways that you hadn't even thought of or anticipated at the time, or maybe even looking back now? Talk a little bit about how some of those skills were actually very complementary and helped become, a foundation for who you are and what you've created today.
There's tons of that's applicable. So invest in communities, create communities. Now businesses, particularly in the UK, were really slow to digital marketing, really slow. So I was talking about, in 2010, I was talking about LinkedIn, and people were going, in 2007, I was talking about Facebook, and people here were like, even in 2014, 2015, I was talking about how social PPC was going to change the way that businesses reached people. And businesses in the UK were like, sometimes they still are. It's amazing how backward our business community is. There is a lack of competence that's throughout the UK when it comes to business, which is probably potentially why we have some of the challenges we currently have. So there was a thing about actually investing in communities, build communities. When I was a musician, I built communities. and I invested in the community, and I gave back. So, it wasn't just buy my CD. It was, obviously we don't do this now, but download my songs. But it was, which tracks did you like? What bit of that track did you like? I would talk to all of my fans, and I would engage with them at gigs. I would stand by the stage, however long it took, so everyone got a photo. Wow. However long it took. So at the end of gigs, you'd have people line up, they'd want you to sign something or get a photo with you or da-da-da. I would wait however long till everyone got saw, wherever we gigged. If so, a lot of people would post online they'd been to my gigs. I would always comment. So I was doing engagement strategies before engagement was even a word in marketing in that way. So I guess I started out as I meant to go on, which was a human-centric way of communicating, which was, and that's what I bring to a lot of big businesses and governments. So governments, particularly local governments, have engagement strategies where they'll just say, let's just create this funky logo and this idea, and we'll put it in the city centre, and people will stop smoking, or they'll blah, 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 or we'll get people to understand mental health issues. And I'm like, no, you need dialogue. So there's tons that I apply. I guess a bit of it is managing people as well. So if you're the front man of a band, you've got lots of musicians, you need to make sure that they're on time, they're coming up to rehearsal, that they really know what they're doing, and it's very much like that in business. So when I've been running lots of different businesses for a long time, and a lot of those things are really easily applicable. And I think again, consistency. So people at work at my businesses, they have 24/7 psychological support in or outside of the business whenever they need it by psychologists they know and trust. That's really, really rare. And it's so rare that we're still one of the only businesses that does it. We've been doing it for 10 years. So it's kind of, there are things like that where it's that, how do you look after people? How do you invest in people? When I was in music, I would do whatever it is that gave the musicians the support, the confidence, the self-esteem they needed to show up the best version of themselves. In our businesses, we're exactly the same. And then what our head of operations has done is she's operationalized our ethics so that it's all SOP, it's all standard operating procedures in how we engage with the world.
That's amazing. Isn't it interesting? You speak to mental health and you provide such an incredible resource to your teams. And we're seeing more businesses that are starting to do this, but it's still, a fraction of the overall corporate landscape. But isn't it interesting to really take a step back and consider, right now, I think it's roughly 50 Americans struggle with anxiety as one example. And, first of all, I'm not going to get all philosophical or clinical in this context, but from a high level, one thing that's really important for people to know is that anxiety is not a disease. It is an emotional state. It's not something that you have or you are, it's something you experience. And it's supposed to be transient. However, it's patterns of thought, patterns of questions, patterns of our internal dialogue and conversation that drive a lot of those anxious feelings and behaviors. But nonetheless, we're better educated than at any point in history, internationally as a human species. We have more information available to us now than ever before. We have more technologies, more pharmaceuticals, all these things. And is the problem growing or is it shrinking? The scary thing is it's still growing. So main point, I love that you're taking the time to recognize that and provide your team with those resources, because that's such an amazing gift. And that's really fascinating too, how everything tied together for you. I mean, you have the operational aspects that you took from the music industry. the awareness of the importance of building in community and those communications and taking the time to really build relationships with the people that you serve. Because fundamentally, I mean, they are paying the bills at the end of the day, but it feels a lot better when you have a real genuine connection. And I think that's interesting because I mean, you spent a lot of time doing that. You had to have. And at some point, you mentioned you also have to operationalize it because otherwise, we will create our own glass ceiling in terms of what is scalable. We have to find ways to duplicate ourselves in those efforts. How has those lessons on community translated to how you effectively market today? Actually, let's start with this. What's the average business or niche that you work within? You mentioned government as being one of them, local governments. What is the size of the business that you work with? Are they small businesses, medium size? Is there, other than government, particular categories that you specialize in? What does it look like?
So when I started the business, I noticed that a lot of marketing firms were folding, and in the last few years, tons have folded. Even independent associates struggle these days because there's so many new tools out there. So I have always had longevity in sight and understanding that sustainability could be created if we had the financial structure to make that so. So we are agnostic in who we work with. Obviously, we have retainers with all of our clients, but they're all varied. So you'll have some clients that are paying like $1,500 a month. You have other clients that are paying $50 a month, and 50,000 a month. So it's kind of like, but you don't get too many of those big ones. Sorry, you don't get like a big one and then not enough diversity, because so many agencies, they'll get one big client and then that client goes and then they fold and it's done.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So
and the tail's wagging the dog too.
Absolutely. So it's for me, it was about sustainability the way through. Let's work with tons of different organizations, all different shapes and sizes, and make sure we always have a really diverse portfolio. Because if we've got those really big projects and they only last a year, it doesn't matter when it moves on. So for me, there was always a sustainability element, not just in size of business. So the average business client is between 20 and 100 employees, I guess. And then we have some businesses that have like 10,000 employees, and then we have some that are like one-man bands. So it's so diverse. But one of the bits that has really helped us is the international element. So from day one, I said, we're going to work around the world. And within the first year of business, we were working in Houston, different places in Texas. We were doing quite a bit in Japan. We were working in South Africa and Middle Europa. So it was kind of, we always had that thing of, look, some markets are going to fall. And the UK has fallen, I think, 3 times in the last 10 years. Countless businesses have failed. We're actually losing more businesses per week right now than ever before in history in the UK, because the market is so bad here. And it's not affecting us. It's not affecting us because I was like, well, we're just going to have clients around the world. So if one market struggles, we won't. So for me, it was really important that diversity was part of the DNA. The bit that combines all our clients is their ethics, is how they show up, is what they're trying to do in the world. Are they trying to create impact? There are some governments that we cannot work with. There are some governments that we'd love to work with because the way they operate is causing good in the world.
Interesting. Yeah, diversification sounds like to be a theme in your overall history in some context or another. This is an interesting question. At least I think it's interesting. When it comes to making the decision that you're going to serve international audiences, how important have you found it to become familiar with the cultural differences of each country in the world that you're working within? I mean, because there are a lot of different practices. One thing that can be a compliment in one part of the world can be another insult. Um, did you learn some of those lessons the hard way? Has that been a difficult landscape to navigate? Um, and then just marketing internationally, my brain goes, where do you start? Because you have a lot of countries to choose from, and then you can get a bit more focused from there. So, talk a little bit about that. I'm just curious what it's like navigating some of the cultural differences and how you stay ahead of that so that you don't inadvertently, step on somebody's toes or insult somebody.
So so you might know a little history about England,
Hmm.
which is that we used to be an empire.
Hmm.
Not always the kindest empire either.
Hmm.
So a lot of businesses fail, particularly from the UK, when they go overseas, because they still have that order of the empire way of operating. And if you meet people on their terms, there is a phrase that gets around the international relations in the UK as "you've gone native."
Yeah. Hmm.
So, so whilst a lot of people were failing at this a lot, we found it really easy. And the reason we found it easy is because, like, we just went native.
Hmm.
So wherever we went, it was about operating not on our terms, but operating on how they need to receive information. What are their
Hmm.
structures and processes? So people say Japan is the hardest market to enter. It really isn't. All you have to do is have a heightened sense of responsibility, conscientiousness, being on time, um, being capable, being prepared. You just have to have your shit together,
Yeah.
and
It's
and
funny how that works.
that's it. That's it.
Yeah.
And I think so. I prefer operating actually in Japan to anywhere else because it's really simple. If you are the best at what you do, in the way that you do it, and you tell the people who need it, it works. Whereas in lots of other places in the world, take the Middle East for example, we have some experiences in Dubai, etc.
Mm-hmm.
It's got nothing to do with that. It's who do you know who's related to this person who might know this person that it looks good if they hire you.
Interesting. Hmm.
And in the UK, there is again elements of that. Again, there is a, a line of who's closest to me that in a network. You might be shit, but I'll see you every Sunday in the pub. There are ways of operating in different parts of the world that you just have to understand the nuance. So one of the things that the Japanese say to me quite often is a frustration with the UK is they say, you know why I just cannot stand working with British businesses? Because what they say, what they think, and what they do are all completely different.
Yeah. No congruency. Hmm.
No, absolutely. Whereas I think in the US, again, I find that a very easy market because people are more emotionally demonstrative. They, particularly I found working in New York quite very straightforward. Um, you
It
know,
is.
you know what you know, you do it well, great, get on with it. I'll hear from you next year. There's this kind of thing that I find in different places around the world where it's actually a lot easier to operate because not
Yeah.
people are going, oh, where did you go to school?
Yeah.
Um,
No, that's true. It's fascinating. I mean, even thinking about the US, that's very true. I mean, the dynamics of the East Coast and the West Coast, you're gonna have very different communication styles. I mean, it's very different. If somebody grew up on the West Coast, their first experience in New York will be an awakening. I'll put it that way.
yeah.
As we wrap up the show here today, Johnny, I wanted to ask you just a couple things. One, I'd love to have you elaborate on some of the cornerstone services that you offer because you're agnostic and because your depth and breadth of skill sets and experience is so expansive. If somebody is looking for a marketing and communications expert, branding expert, um, you know, where do they start? What questions should they be asking? I guess you're talking about anything from a startup to a big business. So, I mean, that's quite the journey and a lot of different potential shoes to fill. What kind of questions should they be asking you or people like you? How do they know when they should be bringing somebody on that's an expert in those areas? What are some of those maybe milestones, turning points, the questions they should be asking? What might help the listeners pull more from this conversation?
It's actually really simple.
Mm.
So if you're looking for growth, it doesn't matter if you're a startup and you're like, I need to develop an audience, I need customers, we need revenue, or you're a business like a client that we have been working with for the last few years, they've been going for 30 years. They're like, we've got loads of competitors now, they're all VC backed. How do we compete? How do we gain more market traction? Because our competitors are starting to eat it up. Again, they want growth. There is one thing that they need, which is a strategic marketing plan, which is backed by research and evidence. So they need a process. How do we get you from here to there? Because what got you here won't get you there. So that's the first bit, strategic marketing plan that's backed by evidence and research, by professionals that know what they're doing. And then you need a strategic communication path for all your business development. So people come to us for growth. That's the main thing. They want growth, or they want sustainability, or they need to refresh it, because you need to refresh your brand every few years because it becomes stale, etc., etc. So and that can be everything from color palettes to iconography, to symbology, etc., etc. And then there's other services that we provide. So we do that whole big plan, people entering new markets, etc. And then after that, we do all the delivery as well. So you need social media management, PPC management, you need illustration, animation, etc., 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 SEO, or kind of the more technical stuff, web design, development, etc. We just do it. And then that's why people stay with us for years and years and years, until they either sell a business or they decide to do something completely different. We've had, sorry.
Oh, no, this is great. I was just thinking, it sounds like Matcha Media, I mean, really embodies media. I mean, you guys are a true agency that has the ability to provide really complete scope of services. I mean, whether it's to graphics, audiovisual, pay-per-click, social campaigns, inbound, outbound, organic strategies. Communication has been a big thing of what you talked about. I mean, it's really neat because it sounds like you're so holistic. That what I love about it is I like to think about it like a toolkit. I'm thinking about my past life in the health and wellness industry. It's like I took my education to extreme lengths because I always noticed that there would be competing evidence that spoke to the same science. It was like, what's the most effective way to build muscle? I mean, I'm going to grossly overgeneralize things, right? And they would have one organization that says it's in this specific rep range to failure, this many sets of this many reps, just like high level, right? But then there would be inconsistencies. So I started studying them all so that I could better piece it together relative to the person, and in your case, better to the business. And I think having that opportunity to truly customize the experience versus fitting people into their own box makes you a much more dynamic organization, and is ultimately going to be able to allow you to help to serve that many more people. Does that sound right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, I would love to speak at length at some time with you about health and wellness, because that's been a huge part of this journey as well. And when you mentioned that one-to-one interaction with people, somebody who I think is, again, another beautiful human being, Ronnie Coleman, ex Mr. Olympia. He's one of the friendliest people I've ever spoken to. I reached out to him randomly, and he got back to me.
That's awesome.
And there's people like that. I mean, when I was 13 years old, I was a big fan of Muscle and Fitness. No, sorry, Muscle Magazine, and John Kennedy, or is it John Kennedy or Robert Kennedy, who was the CEO at the time, who was working with Wader and all the rest of it. I sent him a letter. I just sent him a letter and said, great to have your autograph, and I love what you're doing. And if you can give me advice, and this was, at the age of like 13, and I think that's, I think maybe I got experiences of people who were like really kind of look up to because they're doing cool stuff in the world, and when I reached out to them, they were just really kind and generous with their time and everything else. And I think that really informed my thing of like, actually, we've always got time to just send somebody a quick note or say hello or, give value and talk to people.
It seems like that was one of those turning points for you where those values got instilled very early on. That we can always make time to make somebody else's day better. It's important to share our knowledge and wisdom and life experiences, ideally help people skip some of the pains that we had to experience in order to get to where we are in life today. But that community is definitely something that is resounding for you. So I appreciate you taking the time to share that. And thank you for our audience today for spending your time with us on the Perpetual Growth Podcast. A big shout out to Johnny Pawlik for bringing so much value to today's conversation. Johnny, where can our listeners connect with you if they want to learn more, either about what you're working on or how they could potentially reach out and work with you?
So mantrahq.com is our website. We also have the retail brand, Tillier Japan, .co.uk and .com. LinkedIn is the only place you'll be able to contact me other than email. I used to be on all the social media platforms, and I used to have extremely large audiences, including obviously MySpace, but it was too much. My LinkedIn gets inundated. I was complaining to my team earlier. I was like, I can't manage this many messages on LinkedIn because I get asked a lot of questions, but I get through it. I get through it once a week. So LinkedIn is probably the best place, but you have to bear with me because I do get a lot of messages.
Excellent. Well, we'll make sure we have all of those links included in the show notes. If you guys missed anything, you can just check down below and reach out to Johnny. Now, if this episode sparks something for you, don't keep it to yourself. Be sure to share it, subscribe, leave a 5-star review to help us reach even more people on their growth journey. And remember, growth doesn't happen by chance. It happens by choice. We'll see you guys all next time.